Welcome, everyone. My name is Maggie Congwin, and I'm a member of the Kellogg Alumni Relations team. Before we get started in a few moments, we wanted to let you know that all attendees will be muted throughout the program. However, we encourage all of you to participate by asking questions at any time via the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Today's program will last about 60 minutes. Our distinguished alum, David Kabiller, will share his reflections on resilience. Following his presentation, David and Dean Cornelli will have a conversation and address audience questions. And finally, today's webinar is being recorded and will be shared on Kellogg's YouTube channel next week. On behalf of the Kellogg School of Management, thank you again for joining us today. And with that, I will turn it over to Dean Cornelli to get us started.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Conversation with Distinguished Alumni series. This is a great opportunity for us to reach out to alumni who are a global leader and ask them their vision in navigating the present crisis. And I am delighted today to welcome a distinguished alumni leader I've been knowing for quite a long time, even before I was the dean of Kellogg, David Kabiller. David is the co-founder and head of business development of AQR, which is one of the most cutting-edge global investment management firm in the world, and really at the cutting edge by connecting, economics, behavioral finance, data, technology, and also, having finance PhD. I heard you have more than 70 PhDs, finance professor. I have to tell you, AQR is by now scaring all business school because they're attracting away all the finance professors. So it feels more like a finance department of a business school. And we are very proud to call him our alum. And I met David, as I'm saying, when I was still at London Business School, where he really created there the AQR Asset Management Institute, which really became a hub in London for the investment management community to see cutting edge research. He created the AQR Award for young researchers. I've seen a lot of very promising young researcher and now superstar in finance going through there. And it's really, I always appreciated the really commitment to serious research, to a large vision, to promote a young researcher. So as you can imagine, I was so delighted when I arrived in Kellogg and found he was an alum of Kellogg. So welcome, David, and thank you for being here. Now, I want to ask David to start sharing a presentation that he has, but if you want to start also asking questions, at the end we'll ask him questions. Thank you, David.
Great. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for taking time out to listen today. And I also want to thank Francesca. We all get very busy in our lives and with our careers, with our families and charities. And I've been involved with Northwestern as a trustee for a while, but a little less involved with Kellogg. And when I saw Francesca was chosen to be the dean, and we've had some very great years at Kellogg. I think we're very thankful for you to come here because under your leadership, this place is going to do even better. So I'm really thrilled, and I look forward to being more involved because of you. So thank you. So first of all, I hope everybody out there's families are well and healthy. There is seemingly for all of us in our lifetimes we don't really have any context to this because this is such a rare moment in time. And so I humbly, as colleagues of yours, will just share with you some of my experience. 33 years ago, I graduated Kellogg. And I remember I came right out from undergrad, not knowing what I wanted to do. I really wanted to be a professional tennis player. I played tennis at Northwestern, and all I do is feel like a failed tennis player. And so when I came out, I was looking, what do I want to do? And I hit at Kellogg, which when I say hit, it was very fortunate to be there because then it was there that I found a passion about investing that I didn't know I had. And it was through meeting some wonderful finance faculty. And I remember going to a friend of mine, and the friend said, work for this company. It'll be great for you. And he pointed to Goldman Sachs. And I never heard of Goldman Sachs. You know, I was a Midwestern kid. My father was a men's clothing salesman, and they said, work for Goldman Sachs. And I thought they said Goldman Slacks. And I'm like, wow. And I found out it was this amazing firm. And so I ended up joining. I remember March 6th, 1986. I called up Goldman, and I was 23 at the time. They interviewed 40 people. I looked like I was 12 years old at the time. And they said I got the job. And I remember how excited I was, because I thought from that moment on, I was like fortunate to be in this wonderful industry of finance. So that started, and that was in 1987 when I took my job at Goldman. And if you turn to the next page, I've had this 33-year career. And I remember when I joined Goldman, there's, you know, my talk today, one of the themes is going to be, you know, we all know that we're in rare moments, but history does not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. And this is often attributed to Mark Twain. And so there are sort of precedents to this to some extent, but they're all different. So I wanted to share with you was really some, over the last 33 years, some moments where the world was on the brink, and some of the lessons that I learned from those moments. And one of them, what happened right when I joined Goldman Sachs, it was 1987. And if you turn the page, I joined Goldman in August of 87. And I was in this mortgage training program class, and it was very intimidating because all these great MBAs were there, and I was relatively young. I didn't even know what a mortgage was. It sounded like they were talking a foreign language. And on October 19th, 1987, many on the phone will know that's the day that the market crashed roughly 22%, all in one day. And I remember the head of our training program came in and just, with some alarm, just said, "You're all dismissed today." And he didn't give us context, didn't say why. And of course, we went home, and they wanted us sort of out of the building. And it was just pandemonium. It came out of the blue. And as you noted, the market was down. And you'll see it on the New York Times article. Already, the narrative was it going to be the Great Depression? And we all know that media today is even on steroids relative to what it was, you know, years and years ago. But the market was down. It had a drawdown. You look at this chart. Drawdown refers to, you know, the peak to trough of the market. It was down about 29%. And it took 3 months to recover. So it was pretty quick. But there were talk and sort of desperation. But at the time, I was only 23 years old. I didn't have a family. I didn't have a mortgage. I know when things are down this big, I knew it's bad. And I felt anxious. Am I going to have a job? But I noticed the people around me, the older people, who had jobs. I was reading about people who were over levered, who committed suicide. So it was just terrible trauma that was going on in the world. People were losing their jobs who were over levered. And I saw a lot of people with golden handcuffs, who felt that they were trapped in their career and they had not invested in their knowledge. And I remember I had joined the fixed income division at Goldman. And I didn't feel it was the right fit for me. And one of my big takeaways at this time, and I know all of you are at different stages of your career. Some of you may be very advanced, and you know, or even somebody in retirement, or some at the beginning. But here I was at 23, in the middle of, at least at the moment, the world thought it was on the brinks of financial collapse because it was so big. It was the biggest decline in any one day. And it recovered. But one of my takeaways, and this is more of a life lesson for me, was that we all are empowered to create change in our lives. And, you know, we all should have a diversified portfolio. You know, we have not only in terms of the finance, but whether it's our families and friendships, or the books that we read, or the knowledge or hobbies that we have. And I think depression happens to people when the world acts upon them, when you don't feel you have control. And I looked at my situation, and even though it was a bit of a crisis there, just graduated Kellogg, I actually went to Goldman and said, I want to do this division over here, the equities division. They actually made me resign from the firm, and I had a re-interview. I took a risk. My parents told me that I still had a bed at home, even though I just had finished Kellogg, if it didn't work out. And I did get the job. And so I'm not suggesting people need to make radical career changes, but I think it's really important to realize that small changes in your life can create a lot more happiness. And we all have to ask ourselves, what do we want to change incrementally in our lives? And if you think about it, if you're in the middle of the ocean and you have a compass and you turn it 1 degree to the right, that small move, how the implications of where you'll be in the rest of your life, you know, 2 years later, or whatever, it's these small moves can be very material. So all of us just need to realize that we are empowered to create change. And sometimes we overrate the risk to change. And sometimes change is revolutionary, sometimes it's evolutionary. I find in my life that evolutionary changes, small ones, really are a source of empowerment. So this is what I learned in that crash. So then if you further on, I spent another 10 years at Goldman in various divisions learning. And I left to start AQR in 1998. And if you turn to the next page, we went out and we raised money, and we had this incredible track record at Goldman. I had worked with the quant research group at Goldman Sachs as management. I had spent a year trying to convince my now vocal partner, University of Chicago grad Cliff Asness, to leave Goldman, and he said no forever. I'm really the Kellogg business guy, and he's the PhD Chicago finance guy, and symbiotically we need each other. I'm clear on strategy and have a deep understanding of finance. He respects the Kellogg Northwestern, strategy and finance understanding too. But we had shared values and synergistic skills, which I think is core to any partnership. So after a year of trying to convince him to leave, we did. We raised $1 billion. We closed August 3rd, 1998. It was the largest hedge fund closed ever. I tell you that not because of my ego, because there was tragedy that was about to happen after that. So we invested $1 billion in the first few days of August, and then the Russian government defaults on its debt. World markets were down about 14% that month, and then a very famous hedge fund, Long-Term Capital, who was the biggest in the world at the time, was down 44% that month. Now, we geniuses, we were up 1% that month, and we're thinking, no humility, that our good luck continues. And but then when Alan Greenspan flooded the market with liquidity to support the market, and then the tech bubble began in 1999, all of our value indicators got crushed, and we were running a market neutral strategy. We then had a 37% drawdown in our business, our only fund, the first year and a half. And that was in 1999. This is before the market melted down. So I left Goldman. Goldman's going public, by the way, in 1999. We're down 37% in 1999. Everybody else is brilliant. We're dopes. And we've got all these PhDs and this complex strategy. We're down 37. And our assets went from $1 billion to 400 million. Goldman was recruiting me to come back. It was a really tough time and a very stressful time. But we were, we had a lot of empirical finance on our side, and we were very precise in how we measure these things. And we certainly got it wrong short term, but we stayed committed to what we were doing because we looked at it, and it was a very sound philosophy. But bubbles do happen, but they're never obvious when you go through them. And in March of 2000, the tech bubble happened, the bust happened. And you'll notice here in this chart, there was a drawdown as measured by the S&P about 45% in the market. And that took about 2 years to recover. And it was only then, after we had our miserable first year and a half, that we started to recover. And you'll notice too, the rhetoric at the time, you'll notice that the article, it says the year .com turned into .bomb. Again, the media extrapolates, it creates drama. And the reality is some of the greatest companies in the world were created then, whether it's Amazon and Facebook and others. But there was a bubble that needed to be revalued. So we did start turning around. But I will say that one of my takeaways, and for all of you, there's a quote that lies win sprints, truth wins marathons. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. Even bad ideas can be in favor. Bad stocks, bad strategies, relatively speaking, can have good moments or bad moments. You got to play the statistics. And when you're the real deal, and whether you have empirical finance on your side, behavioral finance on your side, whether all of us have practiced and are well rehearsed for whatever the mission we have in front of us, when you've worked hard, you really have the truth on your side. And I think when you go through life and you're well prepared, whether it's for a speech or for whatever you do, an interview, you may have tough setbacks, but you know that the odds in your favor. And so always remember, lies win sprints, truth wins marathons. Now, again, my career kept going. We did recover at AQR, but again, we had more tough times ahead. And if you turn to the next page, we'll see the third very major disaster was the global financial crisis. But even here, AQR, well, the world's not AQR centric, I don't mean to sound like that, but for us, in August of 2007, what predated the global financial crisis, sometimes I feel like we're the canary in the coal mine. There was something called the quant meltdown or the quant quake in August of 2007. There was something that happened in the marketplace in August of 2007. It was a particular deleveraging of market neutral quantitative type strategies. So ourselves, another firm called Renaissance, D.E. Shaw, Two Sigma, we do different things, but there was a common use of leverage and we were all quants, and we all lost a fortune for that month. We were losing about $500 million a day, and doesn't make for great sleep. It was quite stressful. And by the way, you can't point to anything that happened because the markets were flat. And so it was a really tough time in August of 2007. And an anecdote is, it's true, we were going to go public that year. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Lehman Brothers, how crazy, and Merrill Lynch, they don't even exist today, some of those anymore. They were going to take us public. We were at $35 billion at the time. Oxif and Fortress had gone public before us. And the reason why we're going to do it, they valued the firm at some crazy level, and we felt if we had a common currency, we could actually recruit and scale a business and create a unified sort of sense of equity ownership. But, you know, money management firms don't necessarily need equity capital. And one of my colleagues was walking down to the SEC to hand in our S1, which is your regulatory agreement to file to go public on August 6th or 7th, same day the quant quake happened. So he pulled it. We never filed and we never went public. But you can see how fragile success could be. And so we never did go public. And then 2008 happened. The subprime mortgage crisis happened. And you know, most of the world didn't get it right, except for a couple people in The Big Short. And you'll see what happens to the market. It was down about 51%, this drawdown. Tremendous collapse. Firms, not only that were on the brink, did go extinct. And I'll tell you, at the time, I'll refer to, I apologize for maybe it's politically incorrect, but quant racism. Everybody hated quant. In August of 2007, when we had that quant breakdown, everybody said, Renaissance, AQR, you guys are all alike. You're all buying the same data. It's a complete commodity. This stuff will never work again. And the herd mentality comes out again. That was the conclusion, and they wrote us all off. And frankly, our returns are quite heterogeneous, but nobody would touch quants. It was just the biggest commodity in the world. And when 2008 happened too, that further made things more difficult. And our assets went from about 35 billion to about 19 billion. So we had a restructure, but here's the reality that we're all faced with. And I think one of the great things about Kellogg too, we can never rest on our laurels. Capitalism, and we can all debate, is there any perfect political system? But capitalism is probably one of the best systems, and there is no perfect system in terms about creativity, innovation, wealth creation for the most. And the reality is, it is about creative destruction. And at the end of the day, things do commoditize. And you must adapt your business model or die. Things will go extinct, and you got to continually improve your client service, improve your models, improve your risk systems. And I think a lot of the great innovations come from younger people. So if you look at the e-commerce world today and where the innovations come from, a lot of it's from people who are not wed to the past and see new possibilities. But the reality is, one of my big takeaways was business models must adapt or die. And so we created new channels. We built our mutual fund business in 2008. We saw the commoditization of hedge funds. So we created hedge fund betas and new systematic ways to kind of deliver hedge fund exposures. So we recreated ourselves in an adjacent way, both by creating new products and new distribution channels, but by using sort of our core skill still. So again, one takeaway for all of us, and this is certainly universal, is how do you adapt your business model? Because otherwise you're going to die. And it's just a matter of time, whether you want to look at GE today, not that that's dying, but we all have to constantly say, how do we get better? Okay, so now if we turn to the next one, it's the world that we find ourselves in today, the 2020 coronavirus. And I don't like getting lost in cliches about the human spirit. I'll read those types of books. But I will tell you, we have the most connected world we've ever had. We have the best science we've ever had. And while the political environment could be difficult to watch at times, this world will come together. This too shall pass. The world, we're down, 33.8% was the drawdown. We've seen the recovery in the stock market. I know we can talk a bit about the unemployment, which is troubling. And by the way, this is hard. This is real. There is some context to this, which we'll talk about in a second. But this will be solved. but it doesn't mean it's not really difficult. But the world has never been better prepared to solve it through science. And even think about us and the way we're connecting now. We have a set of imperfect situations, but within it, we're going to do fairly well with the way we can still connect, work remote. Again, I'm not trying to say this is easy or trivializing it. Like, people's lives have been lost and touched, but we will overcome this. Now, if you turn to the next page, some humble suggestions. There's again, as colleagues of mine, I will say, I've read some Dale Carnegie too, and there's a quote that he had that says, living life inch by inch is a cinch. And we are all the creators of our own anxieties. It's how we perceive things. No one performs well under pressure. It's how you perceive it. Is it a threat to your being, or is it an opportunity to shine? And if you take it one day at a time, don't imagine the infinite possibilities. And when you do, sometimes if it's motivating for you and you're thinking strategically and you're thinking about all these things, great. But when it starts getting destructive, when it creates anxiety and you create more drama and you create these negative emotions, just say stop. And, we can create our own happiness by thinking about even the joy of being with our families now, the joy of the world being a little more quiet, and to think about what you want to more connect to. So take it one day at a time. And I do recognize for all of us, the situation is hard. And I think it's really important to be kind to yourself. Find something that's an escape for you. Inertia is a very powerful force in all of our lives. I'm 56 now and I have a 2.5-year-old. So he's woken me up out of inertia, but it's sort of ended the existential nature of life to me, and it's created a great purpose and joy. So I just want to kiss him all the time. And he comes into my room. So it's quite joyous. So that's an escape. Good escape for 3 hours a day, by the way, but not 24, but it is great. As many of you know. But again, I think, how can you ask yourselves, what can you do that would be an act of kindness and gentleness to yourself in a given week? And it could be small. And whether it's Tiger Kings, whether it's reality TV, whether it's reading a book, I'm reading a book called Being Mortal now. What is it you want to do that can allow you to escape? And I will tell you, for couples, and I humbly say this to you as my colleagues, Rilke, who's a French poet, wrote a book, and he said, true love begins with the understanding of you being the guardian of each other's solitude. So a lot of you are cohabitating with partners, and you may have kids and tremendous complexities and 2 careers. But can you have that discussion about being the guardian of each other's solitude, where you can give each, because you're both working, you both made up with kids, but how can you protect each other and give each of yourself an hour of downtime a day to recharge? For nothingness, whether it's meditation, fun book, fun TV show. Again, I run pretty hard and intense about work, but I also like to be kind to self and I need downtime. So being the guardian of each other's solitude is also important. And, we live in a very charitable world, and I'm all for it. But I do think charity starts at home, that taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, and then taking care of others. I was joking to Francesca before. I feel fortunate and grateful. We all need luck in life. I wanted to give you guys all my number if I could humbly ask. I was going to give my cell number because I'm available 24/7 here in my house, because I want to be helpful to others now. I have taken care of self. And I think there's a number of people on it, so I told them I not do that now, but I would like to be helpful to you all, because and I have that time because I've taken care of self. And then the other thing too is reach out and connect. And while we're physically isolated, I like one-on-one, and I like downtime and being secluded at my house and reading a book or watching TV but we oftentimes underestimate the dividends on connection. And so whether it's that cocktail party Friday night where you have a call with a friend, Eric Schwartz is a good friend of mine. He's I haven't talked to him for years, but he used to run Goldman Sachs management, and he wanted to do the Zoom thing, which I'm a rookie at. So I said, okay, fine. I was really reluctant to do it. And it was this beautiful thing to reconnect and to talk, because the world around us is so quiet, and we're having this incredible shared experience, tragic in many ways, but also the word gratitude has come from so many people when you readjust your ambitions and expectations. And it's paid wonderful dividends to reconnect to old friends. So I encourage you to don't allow yourself to, socially isolate. And then the other thing is, taking moments to be grateful. That guy, Stuart Smalley on Saturday Night Live, would always look in the mirror and tell himself how beautiful he is. I'm not saying that, I'm not into the false BS, but the reality is the fact that we're healthy, the fact that we live in this age that we can still work remotely through this technology that we have. And again, I'm not saying it's easy or minimalizing it, but God, family and friends, and we're living in the greatest innovation age ever. So these frame of reference can create much more joy and energy. So let me turn to the next page with some comments. You'll notice two dates here. First one's a little bizarre. March 1st, 1665. So that is often the time period when the second bubonic plague hit the UK. And it was often estimated that in London, anywhere between 15 to 20% of the population died. So that trivializes what we're going through now in terms of the loss of a very major city, in terms of just death. And at the time, there was a 23-year-old who had just graduated college, who actually, to isolate himself, went to his family farm. And his downtime, what he did is he used it to create calculus, developed his insight into gravity, and studied and sort of understood the spectrum of light. And it was Isaac Newton. So he doesn't have to become the benchmark for all of us, but how would we want to use our quiet time now? You look at what Isaac Newton did in 1665. Again, it doesn't have to be the benchmark that frustrates us all, but I would argue some of the greatest innovations, not only in science, not only in the way we connect, not only in the terms of thinking about new ways that we work, not only in talking to Francesca and the new great things that will be happening to Kellogg about how they're studying the workplace and the business environment. There's going to be great opportunities out of this. And again, I'm not, trying to be rah-rah. This is just true. And so, and I will say too, if you look at the follow-on year in 1666, the Great Fire in London happened. So they had a double disaster. And the whole city was burned down. And in 67, Christopher Wren, then the great architect, and the whole city came together. And it ushered in one of the greatest renaissances in the birth and the rebuilding of London that we all know today. And so I do think that whether it's New York, which is on its back foot, Chicago, we're all having tough times, or Italy, the world is challenged, no doubt. And we can look at the political landscape and see the tension, but behind the scenes, between private companies, I think the human spirit will rise above this, and great things will happen from this. A lot from young people, but the human spirit is alive and well. And so when you look at May 21st, 2022, 2 years from today, it's with the probability of close to 100% that we'll all be vaccinated. And this too shall pass. This will be a distant memory. One that hopefully we'll learn from, one that will have lasting hangover effects, certainly in terms of office and other economic implications to how we prepare for these things. But when we look at the financial charts, you can look a little blip down. A lot of people's lives have been touched, and I don't want to underestimate that. But people will ask, just like September 11th, 2001, where were you during the pandemic? And what did you do during the pandemic? Whether it's your kids today, your future's kids, friends, people you come to meet. And how did you conduct yourself? Were you connected to others? Did you innovate? How did you develop yourself? What lessons did you learn? So it's a really opportunity for all of us just to look within and to be proud. And so anyways, I know we're all going through together, and my final comment is I just want to wish everybody well, and I wish I could, whether I hug everybody or be a helpful resource to everybody. And so if anybody wants to get in touch with me, I'll try to get back to it, but I won't get my number out, but that is truly a sense of liking to be helpful to you all. So with that, I guess Francesca had a few questions that we were going to talk through.
Yes, thank you, David. So if anybody emails us, we will pass along anything to David. Thank you so much for this great, view and positive, which is, I agree, this is what we need to stay positive and look at the long run. I'm getting questions both in finance and about you. So let me ask a couple about the finance and then about you. So the first one is, how you actually hinted a little bit at the beginning. How do you explain the disconnect between the stock market and the skyrocketing unemployment rates? Yeah. And do you expect to see less volatility in the stock market in the months ahead? Yeah.
So, well, a couple of things. Full disclosure, I got asked the question yesterday, what do you find the most challenging about today's time? Which is a question I wouldn't mind answering, but AQR's had a particularly tough time. I'll answer your question, but I just want to, our asset, we got to, I think we were as large as $224 billion 2 years ago, and we're down about $90 billion in 2.5 years because our value factors are in our favor. I bring that up because it's just been a very from managing through crisis. We can talk about that too. But to answer your question about the real economy versus the stock market, there's no doubt there's 36.8 million or actually 38.6 million now unemployed. It's real, it's tragic, and we can talk about the economic policy that contributed to that, because I think the richness of the packages, while essential, has also induced a very artificial state of being, because I think people are actively being let go because the financial richness of the packages are enticing, and there's a lot of cooperation on that. And in some cases, the packages are even more than they could make at their work. So we've got but those benefits are going to run out. So we're a little bit in an artificial, although real and tragic number that has social implications, and we're gonna have to work through that. But the stock market, as we all know, is like Buffett quote, it's a voting machine short term and a weighing machine long term. Whether or not it's gotten ahead of itself, it's certainly discounting that things are going to normalize. The notion that we're going to have a vaccine with a probability of 1 is a question of when. One of my friends is really leading the global efforts to oversee the COVID vaccine effort. And he believes we will have a vaccine by the end of 2021, but there's going to be a number of them launched next year. There's going to be one that launched earlier in the year, but its efficacy will be a little bit weaker, and they'll get stronger through the year. But the reality is the market is discounting that things are going to be normalized. I also think if you see the way technology stocks are acting, there's been a acceleration of the belief that technology is going to be more essential. E-commerce is more essential. It used to be 15% of sales, now it's 40. And you've just sort of created this world that technology is going to make companies more efficient. My concern is that a lot of these people aren't going to be hired back. I think companies will run more profitably engaging with technology. And so you'll see profitable companies showing good earnings. And let's say half the people or a quarter of them are hired back, or 3/4. I don't have the science. I don't know exactly. Of course, that could lead to the social unrest, because you're going to see people saying, look, people who own stocks, rich people who own stocks, they're all making money. Look at the stock market. I don't have a job. And that's real. And that's going to have to be addressed. And I think there's going to be a lot more volatility ahead. The volatility and the strength of the vaccine, the toxicity of the vaccine, how people are going to, think about mass transit, the social unrest that could come out of this, the political movement, obviously, are we going to have a radical movement to the left? All these things are uncertainty, and uncertainty leads to volatility. I will say that, and we can talk about this later, what do you do about it? I have yet to see in 33 years a prognosticator who's lasted, and we can talk about many stories about people who, like, for example, Elaine Garzarelli in 1987, the only person on Wall Street who saw the market coming as a crash was Elaine Garzarelli. She worked at Drexel Burnham, and all the other brilliant people didn't see it. And then she was celebrated as the guru until she got it wrong every single time for subsequent years. And one other anecdote I'll tell you too, if you think about the subprime mortgage crisis, and this gets to about prediction. John Paulson, of course I'm naming names, obviously a very smart guy, became worth about $15 billion because he got the subprime mortgage crisis right. Well, 97% of the world didn't. Was that luck? Was that skill? Was that risk-taking? I'll tell you, it was a combination of it, and probably luck, probably skill was the least. And the reality is, if you looked at his performance subsequent to those 5 years, it's on his own money. It's been really poor performance. And Paolo Pellegrini, who was the person who worked for him, who found that trade, who put on that trade, made so much money, he went to start his own hedge fund, and he closed up later because of poor performance. So you never can tell the truth by anecdotes, but I share those with you that talks about prognosticators who got it right. Again, this whole notion even a broken clock is right twice a day. The enemy of how to deal with this, or actually the friend of how to deal with increased volatility or in speculation what's going to happen, is diversification.
Okay. So what's happening?
I can hear you.
You can hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. So I'm asking you another question.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I have, there's another one which kind of follow what you say about volatility. One of your colleagues was mentioned as having a Twitter back and forth regarding tail risk funds with Black Swan author Nassim Taleb recently.
Oh, yeah.
How would you describe the AQR approach and strategy to tail risk management and preparing for future downturns? How do you make the fund more resilient?
Yeah. Well, if I could get my partner to stop tweeting, that would be the first tail risk I like to manage. And if you saw the follow-on tweets, it's getting more and more mean between the guys. First of all, you know, I think our thesis is, and it's a very small part of our business, but the reality is buying puts is very expensive. And it's interesting because Nassim Taleb, who has this firm, or is still an interest firm called Universal, you know, it's his moment in the sun because they have sort of a tail hedging strategy that's up a lot, but he doesn't talk about the performance for the last 10 years. You can talk about how you did in the 1 year that it works, but how have you done? And so our view is that, you know, buying out of the money puts as a hedge is very expensive. We've looked at it. You know, you're paying money. There's a price for that. And if you just passively do it, it's a very expensive thing. And we think that other strategies that have sort of a payoff structure like managed futures or momentum-based strategies or market neutral strategies, or you think about canonical hedge fund strategies, arbitrage strategies, while none of them are risk-free by any means, they do have better payoff structures, certainly managed futures, which actually has worked. So our view is that, and again, I don't love this debate that's going on. I don't like the personalization of it, but I think that we just have a view that buying puts is expensive, and that momentum-based trading strategies and trend trading strategies have better expected returns and are less costly. They're sort of, for lack of a better term, they give you a positive expected return, and they have a little bit of an insurance characteristics to your portfolio on average. Yep.
There's another one. It says you touched on AQR's restructuring, pursuing new products and channels. I would love to hear more about that decision process to move away from your core hedge fund and how you refocus the energy at the firm away from your core products to develop something new.
Well, you know, I think you always have to be true to yourself and stay with your adjacencies. Otherwise, it's not authentic or sustainable. And as quants, it's very easy for us to go long what we like, short what we don't like, because we have views on things we like and don't like. So in a hedge fund, you can go long what you like Microsoft, short what we don't like. Let's say it's some microsystem, you do it, hedge fund. But we can also run long only products because you can give us something like the S&P 500, and it's just a matter of how we constrain and optimize against the benchmark. So let's say Microsoft is a 4% weighting in the S&P 500. What we'll do is we'll overweight it relative to its holding. And let's say there's a stock we don't like in the S&P 500. As opposed to shorting it, we'll hold zero. So my point is that AQR as a quant has the ability to build hedge funds going long and short, less constrained, run beta neutrality, or we can run a more constrained version of our process by over and underweighting relative to a benchmark. And so it's the same expression of our skill, just different constraints. And the reason why we did it, and by the way, we did it at Goldman. We were always managing hedge funds and even mutual funds. So we had a rehearsal for this at Goldman, is look, at the end of the day, beta is a good thing. You know, long-term, you want to have beta in your portfolio. If you think about it, most hedge funds have terrible business models. Look, when it works out, it works really well because you get this great performance fee and the economic can be very powerful. But in a purest format, hedge funds, if they're, you know, really shouldn't be charging big fees on passive beta. And so when we look at our business, we think about the Sharpe ratio of our business. We always have. We've always thought about our business as a risk-adjusted return. So if you just have market neutral, well, where's your beta? Beta is a good thing to have. It's diversifying. It's not correlated. So the Sharpe ratio or the risk-adjusted returns of a firm that has not only a long-only component, but also a market neutral component, that totality is much more stable, builds equity value. And so we were able to do it. We actually launched our first long-only product actually in 2000, not just in 2008. 2008 was a whole new channels and new products, but we've always felt it important to be in the beta business. And look, in the last 12 years, you can see the rhetoric. Who needs hedge funds, right? Everybody's saying, who needs them? They've performed poorly. All we need is private equity. And look, the market just goes up. You just need the S&P. No, we don't agree with that. But it's nice that we have a big beta in our portfolio and we charge fair fees for it. So again, it's consistent with our skill set, and it's just a way we can optimize our output.
Oh, thank you. There's a very long question. I'm gonna just take the last part, which is what advice do you have in not getting bogged down by improbable scenarios?
Wait, say that again, my little
when you talked about don't imagine the infinite scenario, because you said don't imagine the infinite scenario. So how do you reconcile this with the very reality that the career we've chosen, investing, often involves contemplation of a wide range of scenarios and risk? Or in other words, what advice do you have in not getting bogged down by improbable scenarios?
By the way, well, I love the Italian accent, and I have my 2.5-year-old screaming "Daddy" right now because we locked my door.
We can
so now
have
it's like a child abuse. It's probably like a child abuse thing we're doing. wait, you said, how do I escape? Do you hear this?
Okay, yes. So it's because you referred to the you said before, don't imagine the infinite scenarios. And then for the question is, how do you reconcile this with the very reality that the career that we've chosen, investing, often involves contemplation of a wide range of scenarios and risk? Said differently, what advice do you have in not getting bogged down by improbable scenarios? And says, I recognize the irony in my asking this in the middle of a once in a century pandemic.
Yeah, so there's a couple different dimensions there. So there's the investment process you're talking about, or the emotional process. So if I take it as, there's an infinite amount there's an infinite amount of scenarios that in terms of outcomes that the world can take place. I think that's right. Like if you think about the world, if you're an investor and you think about the different outcomes, I can get 10 brilliant people over here saying, I think this about interest rates. I think this about, the economy. I think this about China. And you're right. So if you're an investor, there's an infinite amount of scenarios you can create. And that's why I do think quantitative process lends itself well, because it's very easy emotionally. If you don't have quantitative analytical tools, how do you weight these factors? Because there's an infinite amount of data out there. What matters? How do you weight what matters? So first of all, I think we've spent years and years thinking about, fundamental factors. And I think there are some things that are tried and true that do work. But here's the reality. Even if we're right, if you look at Warren Buffett, he's got a Sharpe ratio of 0.7 maybe. The reality is, if you're a really good investor, you might be right 52% of the time. You're gonna have a lot of times being wrong. So first of all, I'd say you have to have a defensible strategy. It has to be well articulated. And I think you have to have a lot of different bets on, because you're gonna be wrong a lot. So I guess my notion is that, like, for example, we're the house, we're a casino. And we believe every single table we have down has a bit of an edge, because we look at the economics that drive every single bet that we have. We think the odds are in our favor. So we have a managed futures business. We have a convertible R business. We have a quantitative market neutral business. We have a beta business. Every one of those silos we believe in, but any one of them could get things wrong. And it's about the power of the collection of whole. So I think the person who asked that question, think of yourself as a casino, but you're the casino that has the edge. The statistics on your side, because if you have value factors, or you have some empirical truth behind what you're doing, that it will work more often than not. When I say more often than not, it's not like a car that works every day. It's 52% of the time. So you got to give a lot of thought, not only to your edge, but the number of bets you're placing, and the number of different strategies you have down, because you can have a card counter come in and take all your money away. And then in terms of emotionally how you deal with this, I do think, you watch that show Billions, there's this intensity of hedge fund managers, there's intensity of investment managers. I think you need to have your escape, whether it's your family. And there's some people who think if they're switched on 100% of the time, that they're going to make better decisions. I think if you don't nurture yourself and take downtime, you're not going to make better decisions. Like the harder you work, I think you'll actually lose creative insight. And so you need to have your escapes to take away, to have downtime, so you can refresh yourself for a fresh look.
So I actually have a question, which is a perfect follow-up for this. It says, it sounds like you take lessons from others and you also value recharging. What are you reading now? What lessons have you learned from this reading?
Yeah, so I'm reading Being Mortal And
there was a question later of someone who, yes, who did
you know,
recognize your quotation. Exactly. Perfect. Thank you.
yeah, I actually, you know, I'm being 56 now. And, you know, there's again, not letting inertia run our lives. There's sort of in life, there's this philosophy that you learn, earn, and return. And I still want AQR to do well. We're having certainly a tough time now, and I want to figure out how, you know, and for our clients not to do well, I find profoundly devastating, and also not to be able to nurture and invest in our people the way we want to is challenging. But you know, so I'm committed to trying to work through that. But at the same time, at this age, I want to make sure my portfolio is diversified. So I actually, you know, recharge through. I'm working with Stanford right now. Actually, they have something called the Longevity Institute, and I'm really interested in the emotional well-being and satisfaction, feeling of relevance of older people. I think if you look at this world, we're all searching for longevity, and then it's like, be careful what you wish for. Then you get there, and it's like, what do you got? What's the quality of your life? And so, you know, being mortal is really, it sounds morbid, but it's quite charming. Well, it's insightful. It's about death and how we can actually face it in a more beautiful way, and help people and make, you know, make people and older people more comfortable, more relevant. So doesn't sound like that's recharging to talk about death, but it is recharging to think about figuring out. I'm right now at a point of how can we help older people feel more connected. That's quite joyous as I look at my mom, who's, you know, 86.
I met your mom.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
doesn't look at 86. She has still a lot of energy.
Yeah.
I have another one. How has Kellogg shaped your leadership style?
Well, you know, I think it's well, first of all, it was responsible certainly for me to sort of discover. It was a great place of discovery when I was there. And I think that the humility and value system of the Midwest that you kind of get there is also emanating the culture there. I think I've always been about team. You know, when I think about AQR, I look at my partner, Chicago, and like, I don't need my name up in lights. And I think that, to me, I'd rather have a smaller part of something I believe in that I'm really proud in than a bigger part. And so I think when you go to Kellogg in terms of Midwestern values that are pervasive, whether it's in the professors, whether it's in the students, whether it's in the air, you know, obviously this whole team culture, the spirit of fun and fluidity. Like, I love to work hard and play hard. And so I think there's this stuff in the air at Kellogg, which you don't even necessarily, that you know about, that you just kind of live, that you don't realize how unique it is. So I guest lecture at Harvard every so often, and it's like, it's so tightly wound. You know, obviously some great students at a great place. But Kellogg, I think leadership with care and empathy. I went to West Point. I met with some generals, and what struck me, and you can't fake it, but taking pride in the people that work for you, as you would take pride in your child's accomplishments. And I feel authentically about our people at work. And maybe, you know, it's easier when you're a founder. I'm not competitive with the people who work with me, but my level of joy when I see young people do well is so profound. And I think that taking joy in the people that work for you doing well and them experiencing that. So I think Kellogg also fosters empathy, humility, teamwork. And you know, sometimes I keep thinking about writing this book. Actually, I won't do it, but it's just the mythology of icons. There really are no icons. We all deify people, and they all fall from grace, and we're all human. And, you know, you need a little more luck. Certainly there's some really smart people, but like Steve Jobs, if he, you know, obviously he's super talented, but, you know, he found that technology at like Xerox Research Park. And if you didn't have that, you know, things could have worked out a different way. It's not to say people aren't really talented, but we tend to deify people. And I think there's a great humility about Kellogg, a great work ethic, a great teamwork, and I think the values there are great. And it is a unique place.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And given that you actually talked about your team, there was actually a question here. What does AQR do to maintain its culture?
Yeah, you know, it's I created something called the Quanta Academy. And quanta refers to the small particles of life, quantum physics. And it's spelled with an upside down A, which is very geeky. That's a mathematical symbol meaning inclusive of all. And our Quanta Academy is our learning and development capability, because you can all talk about culture, and culture is sort of, maybe it's after you forget all the facts, it's what the essence of what you probably think about a company, and you live your culture, and so if you care about your people, what are you doing for them? That's not what you say. And so there's 3 dimensions to Quanta. There is building people's technical skills, building leadership and management, and then there's a whole thing about personal well-being, about whether it's meditation, book clubs, the importance of sleep. And so I think, you perpetuate your culture when first of all, you have shared DNA. So I think we do at the top have shared cultural values, like clients come first, intellectual integrity, intellectual honesty. It's a very research-oriented firm. We are in service of others. We don't have proprietary businesses. We typically hire out of academia. And I will say, to build a culture and sustain it, you have to organically grow it generally. And so when you hire people who are more tabula rosas out of college and out of graduate schools, you're able to shape that culture as opposed to being a mishmash of 25 other firms. And then this learning and development capability, when you have young people, if you want to build a bond with your people that work with you, well, are you investing in them? What are you doing for them? And I'm a big believer that you got to give to get. And that's whether that's compensation, that's also, we got to pay dividends. We owe, as a founder, we owe. We can say we're grateful, but what are you doing to show your gratitude? So when we talk about Quanta, and we talk about the 350 classes we had last year, and we talk about the professors that we bring in, or like we have a book club, for example. We actually had the head of Asian Studies come in and teach us a book on Chinese culture, because we have 70 Chinese foreign nationals working at AQR. And we have this shared experience with this brilliant professor to understand the lives and different cultures that are going on in China. You build bridges and communication. So we perpetuate our culture by hiring the right people with shared values, typically out of graduate school and undergrad. We nurture and develop them. We've had continuity leadership, and we invest in our people through Quanta. And that helps perpetuate it.
Oh, that's amazing. I have so many questions. I think I will send you all the questions afterwards. And there's also a lot of messages of thank you. So I'll send you them all. One more, you mentioned that you discovered your passion for investing at Kellogg. Has that passion evolved over the course of your career?
Yeah, it has. You think about, funny, full circle. Professor Breen, and by the way, Kellogg, great marketing school, right? When I was there, it had probably the third, from my understanding, is the 3rd best finance faculty in the world too. And and it was pretty amazing. By a little anecdotal story. When I got to Kellogg in 1985, right out from undergrad, I heard there was a story that Business Week was about to rank them #1. And I went out and I produced 700 T-shirts there was a person walking up the staircase, and it had like Stanford, Harvard, Chicago, Wharton, Kellogg, or whatever, some order. And the teacher said Kellogg, a step above. And when the article came out in the newspaper, I was there at Kellogg in the middle of the hall selling all these T-shirts. Now that sounds kind of dorky right now, exposed, but I remember making $7 a piece. I made like $5,000 in 20 minutes. And I remember there was a professor of management named Lavengood who walked up to me as a first year and he said, if you had any dignity, you would die now. Because he was referring to my timing was perfect with launching that. So anyways, that was my Kellogg initiation. Well, look, I don't know how I digressed though. You asked what was the...
No, it was about how your passion for investing has evolved.
Yeah. So I was always in search of, is there a best way to invest? Just like I look at Kellogg when they were #1 when I joined, by Business Week, I'm really interested in how does Northwestern be the best? And in investing, there's infinite amount of stories being told and people at the top of the charts. And I was really interested in trying to figure out is there a best way to invest? Is Warren Buffett the best investor? Where's the truth? And I was at Goldman Sachs in search of that for 10 years in 3 different divisions. And there's always anecdotes about somebody doing well, like it's John Paulson, right? Here today, gone tomorrow. If you look at the top 100 hedge funds in the world, 40% of them don't even exist anymore since when we first started. So my point is, how efficient are markets? I basically started a firm with 3 people who are taught that markets are efficient by Fama and French. And here we are trying to find, sustainable alpha. And here I find ourselves down $90 billion in the last 2 years. Our market's efficient. Our market's getting more efficient. So my journey is that markets are really smart. And the interesting thing about Kellogg is that while the finance is necessary, it's not sufficient, and that the marketing of financial services really drives the success. Goldman Sachs is probably one of the best marketed firms in the world. And the reality is that doesn't mean something's disingenuous or not value added. I am a little bit concerned about the commoditization of asset management, the oversupply. You look at the private equity industry, we can say it's the best business in the world because it can't benchmark it. And Francesca, you are about as expert as anybody in the world. And it's a really incredible place to research. And so much needs to be discovered there, but the amount of wealth transference, tough to benchmark. So my 33-year career now, and I'm so viscerally want to add value to clients. I so viscerally, and I know my partners have tremendous intellectual integrity, and we're trying so hard. And I look at these 1,200 people at our peak, buying all this data, doing all this research, and I look at the results. And frankly, while you can say good long-term in many of the things, and I got to say, I respect markets a lot, and I really like to add lots of value. And one of the things that I personally love is adding value to other humans and the human development. That to me is highly tangible. And so I've always been really interested in this quanta and human development, which is a good compliment to my partners too. But I guess my markets efficiency, I've really come to really believe in, and the mythology of icons and the people who can call market direction, I'm highly skeptical on, and that all of us should be owning diversified portfolio of index funds.
That's amazing. Now, I am afraid that we are at the end. I got a lot of text. I definitely have to send them to you, because there's even people that say they've met you and remember you. So, but I really want to thank David, because you really exemplify the best of Kellogg, between the intensity and understanding the market and a strong vision and the incentive of work, as you're saying, but then a big breath, the big vision and thinking really deep. And that is a wonderful combination. And this is really...
Well, I want to thank everybody for listening. I am humbled by people calling in. So number one, thank you, and do connect if I can be helpful. Number two, to Francesca, I said before, I've been less engaged with Kellogg, doing other things at Northwestern, but we're so lucky to have you. And, just as Kellogg was ranked #1 by Business Week my first year, I think over the years, it's still an outstanding school. But I think if everybody on this call we can all figure out, I'm proud to be part of the things that are the best in the world. And when I go overseas, I think Kellogg's got some amazing things going on and great momentum with your leadership. And so I hope all of us can help you bring this to the next level, to shut my partners up who are from Chicago.
Thank you. We are definitely committed to that, to do all together. Thank you so much.
Right,
thank you, David. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.